I will officially welcome everyone, say good afternoon. My name is Sarah Hagee. I'm the Executive Director and CEO with the Electrical Association of Philadelphia. And today I am joined by my colleague, Matt Dibert, as well as our presenter, Lynette Schaefer from LEDVANCE. Lynette, thanks so much for being here today. We would like to thank our sponsor today, Billows Cooper Electric Supply. They're a huge sponsor of the organization, and we appreciate them bringing LEDVANCE to us today. Before we get started, for those of you who have joined us before, you know the drill, but we cannot see you, we cannot hear you. We've done this by design because, of course, we're recording this for those who can't make it live today. And so with that, we will encourage you to use the chat feature to submit questions, which we're going to field towards the end of the presentation. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you all to Lynette Schaefer. She's the Director of Lighting at LEDVANCE. She's got over 25 years experience in lighting, starting her career in electrical distribution and then spending over a decade in manufacturing. For the last 4 years, Lynette's passion and drive for education and teaching has led her to focus on educating others on lighting, from designers to distributors to end users, which is very cool. So I think we're in for an awesome presentation. So with that, Lynette, I will kick it over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for having me today as well. All right, we got a lot of things to go through today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, you might be saying, why are we talking about controls and why are controls so important? Well, first of all, here's why controls are so important today. So first of all, when it comes to energy codes, there are basically two national models that exist. There's the ASHRAE 90.1, and then there's the IECC as well. So most codes, most states basically adopt these different two national codes at their state level. However, or just let me back up a second. They can adopt their own state level code, which basically takes the ASHRAE code or the IEC, and they just kind of scrub it a little bit to typically make it even more difficult to achieve some of these energy savings. So you can imagine California, for instance, and Washington State, they both have their own sort of code that they go by, which are pretty extensive and kind of difficult sometimes to achieve, but we have to keep making it work because we're all about energy savings, right? So when you look at these different codes, this affects anything from new construction to renovated buildings. Basically anywhere that you're taking out a permit, you have to go by these energy codes. So specifically when we look at the IECC energy code, you have some important things to think about. First of all, the first one is increased lighting efficacy and decreased lighting power density. So that one is part of the IECC. There's a bunch of other stuff, of course, part of IECC, but specifically as it relates to lighting, they're really all about the increased lighting efficacy and decreased lighting power density for 2021. New provisions also with the newest code also require automatic receptacle control. So what that means is that if you have your laptop and stuff plugged in and there's lighting that's being controlled in that space and there's a sensor, that sensor isn't only going to control the lighting in that space, but that sensor is also going to send a signal to that receptacle where your laptop and all your stuff is plugged in. And if that sensor says nobody's in the space, then that receptacle is going to say, oh, I'm going to shut down and not provide any power. It is another way to save energy. Yes, it can be very annoying, but more and more codes are adopting this. And obviously IECC, this is kind of a newer thing as of 2021. In addition to the IECC, as I mentioned, there's also ASHRAE. It was founded back in 1894, and they basically focus on the systems, the energy efficiency, indoor air quality, refrigeration, sustainability, hence the reason why they're called ASHRAE. If you add up all those words I just said, they basically mean American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Conditioning, air conditioning as well. All right. So what does ASHRAE focus on? Well, they focus on the design, the construction, the operation, and the maintenance of the buildings. This does not include residential buildings or those that are less than or equal to 3 stories. So that's basically why I'm showing you these two, is because they are all about controls. And if we don't have a good understanding of how to incorporate controls into projects, we will be left on the sidelines. And I don't think any of us want to be there, right? As far as understanding which states have what adoption as far as energy goes, there's always a chart online. I recommend just Googling it. You can type in ASHRAE, and typically a chart like this is going to come up right away. You're going to find that most of our states are at least 20 2016. I shouldn't say that. I guess quite a few of them are still kind of stuck in the 2007 era, but a lot of them are going to most likely start adopting some of these other ASHRAE codes, and they change every 3 years. So right now we're on 2022, and this is of course the most robust. Those little ones with the pins are the states that are starting to move towards that ASHRAE 2022 standard. So if you're in those states, you really need to keep up on energy codes. You really got to be up on your controls and how you can incorporate all of those things to make sure you're meeting the local recommendations and code requirements too. Additionally, I just wanted to also state that the standards for watts per square feet are also changing. So this basically means if I'm standing in a square, all right, 1 foot by 1 foot square, how many watts are being used in this one little space right here? As you can see, when you compare ASHRAE 2016 to 2019 to 2022, a lot of those numbers are going down, which means the less watts per square foot, the more energy efficient your building is. It can be very difficult to achieve these low watt requirements, and it takes a lot of planning and organizing to understand how you can get to these levels, which is pretty interesting too, but it exists. All right, so my first poll question are, if you wouldn't mind launching it, I'll let you guys think about it as he's launching this, but what are 2 national models as it pertains to energy codes? That's question number 1. And I don't know how long you need to, yep, just gonna say. Okay, well, we're doing pretty good on the answers so far. You're exactly right. So we have ASHRAE 90.1 and IECC. All right, let's keep moving on. All right, so here are a few highlights from the 2016 ASHRAE standards to the 2019 ASHRAE standards. I'm going to kind of highlight more the 2019 than anything else, but as you can see, specifically in parking garage 2019, continuous daylight dimming down to 50% is now required for luminaires within 20 feet of wall openings. Before in 2016, it used to be 30%. Also, office spaces greater than 250 square feet, as well as restrooms, shall be controlled by occupancy sensors. And of course, conference rooms, mini rooms, training rooms, storage rooms, break rooms shall be controlled by auto on or manual on, meaning vacancy or your occupancy sensing. So this is just a highlight. There is a lot more that goes into these codes, but this is a highlight. So in other words, if you're out calling on or specifying a new parking garage, you need to be aware that you have to meet this energy code requirement if your state has adopted the ASHRAE 2019 standards. Okay, that's what I wanted to drive home. So what else is driving controls? DLC is driving controls, and DLC has to primarily do with how many rebates you can get, what rebates are available, what the dollar amount of those rebates are going to be. And so they have included something new now, and the new thing is called luminaire level light control. Luminaire level light control means that you have a luminaire, and inside that luminaire, there's a driver, and inside that driver, there is a smart device of some sort. We typically call it a node or a fixture controller that basically allows that particular luminaire to be controlled via network lighting controls, okay? So why is this important, I should say, is because a lot of the luminaire level light control luminaires allow you to easily incorporate a network lighting control solution, and you can do it either on day 1 or you can do it a little bit later. So we call this technology luminaire level light control. It is a new kind of word in the last few years. And I've also seen it come up on more rebates and energy incentives where they are giving more money back if you do buy an LLC product. So I just wanted to explain what that meant too. All right. Now, in order to understand, so that was basically the codes, the regulations, what's driving this whole control conversation these days. So the next thing is I kind of laugh a little bit, but a lot of people will come to me and they're like, hey, Lynette, I want to add controls to my project. And my first question is, well, what kind of controls? So when you think about controls, there are so many of them, right? You can simply turn the light fixture on and off. That's a control. It's a manual control. It's very easy. It's very straightforward. You can increase and decrease the intensity, right? So you can dim them up and down. You can set the maximum brightness, which we refer to in our industry now as high-end trim. When you set the maximum brightness, what you're doing is basically allowing yourself to save even more energy and be able to make sure that that lamp or that fixture or luminaire doesn't produce any more lumen output than what you have it set at. That's the high-end trim. Low-end trim is exactly the same, except for that instead of high-end trim, it's low-end. So it's the lowest amount that your lamp or your luminaire will turn down to. A lot of times people will use low-end trim in, say, a stairwell, where they never want that light to go below a certain level. Then, of course, we also have the ability to change your CCT. You can even change color now, of course, with LEDs. So you can have red and green and blue, or you can go from like 2700K to 3000 to 4000 to 5000 and so forth. You can also set schedules. Of course, you don't need a fancy lighting control system to be able to set schedules, right? You can easily set schedules by just using a time clock. I have that actually at home. I have a time clock where my lights go on and off at certain times. I don't have a fancy control system for that, at least I don't. But you can easily add that without having a big fancy control system, right? For indoor or for outdoor applications, maybe you want to use a photo cell, or maybe you need ambient threshold, where the lighting will automatically come on or off when it gets dark, traditional kind of dusk to dawn, right? And then, of course, we also have the daylight harvesting, which, of course, looks at not only daylight coming into the space, but also artificial light. You've got the zoning and the grouping, which everybody seems to like these days, especially because you get that with network lighting controls, and you can change your groups and zones without having to get up on a ladder and do any more rewiring or different rewiring. Which makes it really flexible, and also allows you to also save some energy too, if you've got spaces and groups of fixtures that just a space that isn't being used a whole lot. Of course, you can also control now your load control, just like I explained at the beginning with the receptacle. You now can incorporate that with your lighting project to be able to have plug load control. Or maybe you want to add sensors, whether it's occupancy sensing or vacancy sensing. And then these other ones have to do specifically with occupancy. What's the sensitivity level? What's, how much movement do you want it to have? What's your hold time? And what's the time delay? How often, how much do you want those lamps or fixtures or luminaires to stay on until they turn off? So as you can imagine, when somebody asks me what they want to do, and when they say, hey, I want controls, I have to ask the question is, what are you looking at doing? If they're just looking at, say, reducing the wattage because they're afraid they might have too much light in the space, they don't need a fancy control system. They can get by just using a product, like this high bay, for instance, where they can select their wattage. If they select their wattage to a lower wattage, that's going to reduce their lumen output without having to have it be controls, right? So those are just the kind of things to kind of keep in mind as you're talking about controls. So all of these different controls scenarios that I talked about, they can all be achieved in different ways. They can be achieved through standalone control options, or they can be controlled through network lighting control. The thing with standalone controls specifically, I always refer to this as the popcorn effect. So basically what happens is that, let's say you have a warehouse and you have an aisle in that warehouse. When you walk in and one of those sensors goes off, just that one goes off, and then you keep walking and the next one goes off, and then you keep walking and the next one goes off. Those are basically an idea of the principle of a standalone control solution, where each individual fixture or luminaire is kind of beating to its own drum, right? It's not grouped together. It's not zoned together. It senses motion, boom, it turns on. It doesn't sense motion, it's going to turn down. Some people don't like this type of system because, especially in, say, like a parking garage, if you were to drive your car into a parking garage and they were using standalone controls, they would have this popcorn effect going on, and that's very much of a distraction, right? Now, you can certainly, if you want to, group standalone controls together, but you would have to run low voltage control wires from one to the next, to the next, to the next, which gets very expensive because now you have two more wires that you have to pull in order to connect these standalone controls together, which can be very expensive. So instead, what people like to do is they like to move to network lighting controls. Network lighting controls allows the user to change their groups, create their zones, change them, and just do whatever they want with their lighting with just an easy app. No 0 to 10 volt wiring, no nothing like that. So once you put the control system in, and I'll show you how easy that is to do. Once you do that, you have complete flexibility over what luminaires you want to have turn on and which ones you don't, based on the people in the space and how much action there is, and you can change it at any time. The other nice thing about network lighting controls is that you can do all of these control strategies with one solution. So for instance, LEDVANCE Link, our solution here allows you to do all of these things with just, you don't even have to pick and choose. You get the system and then you use the app to set everything you need it to do. With a standalone control solution, you would have individual components to be able to accomplish all of these things, which is also kind of a bit annoying. Some people still like standalone controls for certain applications, but with network lighting controls now being so easy to add to luminaires and to add and incorporate into projects, a lot of people are starting to gravitate towards network lighting controls, and also a lot of network lighting controls will offer greater incentives too. So as I briefly talked about, network lighting controls, the far right one here, that is usually programmed or commissioned, that's the appropriate word to use, via an app. Specifically for LEDVANCE Link, we have it available on Android or iOS, and it is free. And again, that is only for network lighting controls. Within that app, there's all kinds of cool things you can do, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. If you're dealing specifically with standalone controls, normally you will be dealing with some sort of remote control, and you would have to physically take that remote control and shine it at every single one of those luminaires in order to program it. So you can imagine you would have to walk around the warehouse and go click by click by click to program all of those standalone controls, which can be kind of a nuisance and annoying situation. Also, some standalone control solutions do also offer the ability to set your time delay and some hold times and some other things via a dip switch. That's also an option. But for the most part, nowadays, a lot of manufacturers are kind of gravitating towards, for standalone controls, a remote, and for network lighting controls, more of an iOS or Android app of some sort. All right. So before I get into the really cool stuff and get you guys really excited here, I need to talk a little bit about how controls have come a super long ways. And in order to explain this, it's really important for you to understand basic wiring. So take your basic wiring, right? So it usually consists of 2 or 3 wires, okay? And it usually is running out of the electrical panel, it runs through the walls, and then it comes out into your light switch on your wall, okay? So when you flip that switch on the light to turn it on and off, you now have power to your lamps, right? They turn on. We call this just line voltage, okay? Now, if somebody wants to dim that and they wanted to do it with the wiring that's there without incorporating any other type of wiring, they can do that. They would have to bring in, obviously, a dimmer switch that is compatible with whatever lamp or lighting source you're using. But in this case, all they would do is they would dim the switch up and down through that same exact wire that's there, and they would be able to dim. We call this triac dimming or line voltage dimming, okay? Now what happens is this is very common in residential applications, by the way. But what happens is when you start moving into commercial applications, you get into a little bit more of this 0 to 10 volt dimming situation. So now you still have power, your normal power, going to your lamps that's there, your fixtures that are there, right? But now if you want to dim in a commercial application, you're typically going to be looking at incorporating 0 to 10 volt dimming controls or dimming, right? So what happens is that you have to incorporate 2 more wires. So you would actually have to pull wire from that light switch or from that dimmer switch and bring it all the way out to every single one of those luminaires that are in that ceiling. That can get very costly and expensive. And if you can't get into the wall in a retrofit situation, that can be problematic as well. And so that is 0 to 10 volt dimming, different from triac dimming. And then, of course, we have wireless controls, and this is where it gets fun. So now wireless controls, sorry, I was a little bit behind on my video there. So now with wireless controls, what happens is that you still have power going out to your light fixtures. They still have to have power. They magically don't just turn on. So you still have to have power there, But now you can incorporate a wireless controller, such as, this guy right here, this little wireless controller. And now when I hit buttons and so forth, it will send a wireless signal. So there's no wires, there's no 0 to 10 volt dim or 0 to 10 volt wires that you have to deal with. There's no nothing. But in order for each one of these luminaires here to be able to turn on, they have to have something inside them to be able to be capable of taking a command from this little remote to be able to tell what it, tell it what to do, right? So that is the glorious thing about network lighting controls or wireless controls, is that you're no longer dealing with any wiring, and you can still use your on-off switch if you want to maintain your on-off power if you choose to. You don't have to, but you can. And then you can just incorporate a little switch wireless controller wherever and whenever you want to. And then, of course, you can also group your luminaires, you can create zones, you can do all kinds of fun stuff, and you can change it whenever you don't want to, which nowadays it happens quite a bit. We always are, it seems like we're changing something, right? So it's nice to be able to have that flexibility. The other thing that I just want to note is that when you are retrofitting and incorporating controls, you need to be aware of circuits typically. But with network lighting controls, you don't have to be aware of that so much anymore, because now, as long as you have power running to those luminaires, you can create whatever groups and zones that you want. So circuits don't really matter anymore when it comes to network lighting controls, which makes it even better. And let's just say you only have one switch in the room and maybe you wanted two. Fine, you can incorporate two wireless controllers, one maybe when you walk in the door and maybe one at the other door, and you don't have to do any wiring to make that happen. So it's a very neat, easy concept when you start looking at it. All right, so let's go ahead and move into what controls are all about. All right, so, and this is really the meat of the presentation, and it's the quickest part of the presentation. So adding controls to luminaires and lamps today is super, super easy. So it's basically a simple plug and play. You don't even need to be a licensed contractor or an electrician. And here's a couple of examples. So first of all, here is the first example of a plug-in. That's the one that's shown on my screen, but I'm going to show you another example of a screw-in design. So as I hone in a little bit on this image right here, it has this cover currently. And what you do is when you're ready, you don't have to do this on day one. You're just bringing power to the fixture. You have power to the fixture, no low voltage wires, no nothing, but you remove this little center cap. And then at that point, you can add, this happens to be a PIR standalone sensor. Just keep in mind that usually comes with this little piece that protects the prongs. So you take that off and you simply screw it in. And I just now converted that luminaire to a standalone control solution. Now let's say that, I decided I changed my mind. I don't want the popcorn effect anymore. Instead, I want to do network lighting controls. So instead, same exact thing. This is the Link network lighting control sensor and fixture controller. You do, in this case, need an adapter. This thing doesn't cost much of anything, but you attach the two together. And again, there'll be a little protector on the end. You take that off, and then you simply screw this in. And now I just converted this fixture to a network lighting control solution. If I do that with all the fixtures that are in the space, and then I get my app, then I can start to group luminaires, create my zones, do my brightness, incorporate the vacancy sensor, or create this to be a vacancy sensor or a daylight harvesting sensor or an occupancy sensor. It just depends on how you set it up using the system. This is also available not only on this UFO high bay, it is also available on our linear high bays, and it's also available on a number of other products, which I think I'm going to be showing you in just a second. Another option is to, if you have this, you may have, say, like a 2x2 troffer or 1x4. In this case, we have another option for you. I'll go ahead and hone in this one. So this is basically another similar thing, just looks a little different. But in this case, you take a screwdriver and you pop off this cap. Once you pop off the cap, you're going to see this wire harness come out. And then you are going to take this, which is a fixture controller with a sensor, network lighting controls, LEDVANCE link, same exactly as this one here that I showed you. Let me go ahead and grab this one. It's the exact same thing, just a different form. based on the luminaire that you're using. So in this case, instead of screwing it in, you simply plug it in. If I can see and have the right angle, but you plug it in. And then once you plug it in, if you get the right angle here, there we go. And then you simply snap it in. And now I just converted that luminaire to a network lighting control solution. That is how easy it is to add network lighting controls or standalone controls. These are both available in either network or standalone. And you don't have to worry about being an electrician. You can group fixtures, create your zones, create your brightness, create your scenes, all that stuff. It's that simple. Okay. There's another option too, which I'm not going to get into today, but they call it a behind the lens sensor. It has a very similar kind of concept where you're basically plugging it in. So again, you can do it yourself. And then the lens of the fixture just goes over top of it. And we also have this Z10 receptacle too, which is a few people in our industry have it, but we don't really have a ton of products that have this particular type of receptacle. Most of ours are going to be the screw-in design or the snap-in design that you see here. So how do you know that you are going to be purchasing a luminaire or specifying a luminaire that is controls ready? It will, moving forward, be marked controls ready. And how do you know if you're using a luminaire level light control from LEDVANCE? It will also say LLLC. And with the LLLC, it includes these three products that you see. So basically the retrofit door kit, the volumetric troffer, and the panel. All of those have a driver with a fixture controller built into it so that you can easily, again, incorporate any sensors or any other things that you might want to incorporate. And you can see here, these are some ideas of the controllers that you can include if you choose to do so. All right, so our next question is, if you want to launch that poll question for me, what does controls ready mean? All right. You might have launched. Oh, there we go. Yep. All right. Very good. All right, moving on. So next up, we have the quick snapshot of all of those products that are controls ready with our standalone control solutions. And you can see here, we have quite a few that you can add standalone control solutions to. And we also have very similar luminaires that are also available for network lighting controls. So the technology is really in the source that you put into it. It has nothing to do with the luminaire itself. So that's why you see a lot of repeat numbers. It's not based on the luminaire. It's based on whatever the control device that you're putting onto it. They all kind of work in the same general principle. And that's how that kind of happens. The last thing I want to do is just show you a little bit about what the LEDVANCE Link smartphone app looks like. This is free, Android or iOS. And you can see here, you've got all these different features from adding to removing luminaires. You can select scenes, create zones and groups. You have your wireless switch that I said, or your wireless controller you can incorporate. You can also do scene selection. And there's also additional features too. So the last thing I want to lead you with is, let's say that you're a contractor, you install all of these high bay luminaires or these troffers or maybe a linear high bay, and you get them all in the space. Your customer then says, you know what, I really want to add controls. And at that point, you don't have to panic. All you have to do is just hook them up with the appropriate network lighting control solution via LEDVANCE and easily put it onto the luminaire through that plug and play. And then from that point forward, you can use the app to make any changes. And if you're the contractor, if you get it all set up for them and they decide that they want to make changes after you leave, you can just simply give them a QR code. They can scan it. They'll have full access to that system after you leave. So super neat, easy way to incorporate controls into your project. All right. And by the way, in case I didn't mention it, our system, our LEDVANCE system, does communicate via Bluetooth low energy mesh. What that means is that you basically are communicating without any, well, I should probably back up. Bluetooth mesh basically means that you have all of these nodes or fixture controllers in the space or components, and they're all communicating, meshing together. Specifically, ours does not require a Wi-Fi connection. It does not require Bluetooth, or I'm sorry, it doesn't require a hub. and it does not require a gateway. So it makes it super safe, super secure, and also really easy to install, as you saw as well. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what to expect from that perspective. All right. And that pretty much does it. So Bluetooth low energy mesh. And I think as far as applications go, just keep in mind that we have a lot of different applications you can also choose from. So if you want to launch that last poll question, feel free to, Matt. We'll end with LEDVANCE link uses what type of wireless communication? And we're about at our end point. So Sarah, I want to thank you again for having me today.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation. I always get excited to see all the different ways that lighting controls are used out in the field. And it's amazing how, even in my short time, how we've seen just such a quick advance in making this so easy for people out in the field.
Yes, I know. It's pretty awesome. I wish this technology was here 15 years ago when I was trying to sell these, when I was selling wire and all this other stuff to try to figure out how it all goes together. So yeah, it is pretty fun. And by the way, on that last poll question, I kind of purposely asked it because there is a big difference between Bluetooth and Bluetooth low energy. Bluetooth is like this thing I have in my ear right now, and I can maybe walk outside this little room and then it'll start to, right? Bluetooth low energy mesh is much more reliable, faster data transfer, and there's a lot more benefits. That's why a lot of people out there do use Bluetooth low energy mesh for their network lighting controls. So
excellent. Makes sense to me. Well, thank you. I don't see any questions that have come through the chat. That was a high energy presentation with a lot of information, Lynette, which was amazing. What we're going to do is make sure, with your permission, we're going to send out your contact information to everyone who's going to view this. They can connect with you if they have any more specific questions, as well as our friends here in our local market, Billows. So we'll be sending that information out. And I'm just kind of giving everyone maybe a minute or two, just in case there's a question out there, because we tend to move quickly. But with that, I'm going to let everyone get on with their day. It's a gorgeous day here in the Philadelphia market. Hopefully everyone can get some vitamin D. Lynette, again, thank you. That was wonderful.
You're welcome. All right. Take care, guys. Take care. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.